Still single, Amy?
Yeah.
Good. Then you're not kicked off the podcast. Welcome to episode 2 of the Spinster Life podcast. My name is Eva Taylor.
My name is Amy Kelbing.
We are very excited to bring you a spooky episode in honor of Halloween. Amy, what spinster are we discussing today?
So we're talking about probably the only murdery spinster that I know of. Axe murderer, Lizzie Borden, who was actually more of a hatchet murderer.
It just doesn't have the same ring. We're celebrating all things spooky, and Lizzie is probably the most spooky spinster we can think of.
Yeah. It's spooky, gruesome. She, more than likely, was responsible for 2 very gory, bloody death by axe attacks.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. She was acquitted.
That poem kind of leaves that out.
It just talks about the murdering part. It doesn't talk about, the repercussions and the workings with the justice system. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what happened to Lizzie after the murders. So Lizzie Andrew Borden was born in 1860 to Sarah and Andrew Borden.
It's always weirded me out that, men have their children named after them, but women don't. I think in the olden days they did, though. So, fell out of favor.
I'm kind of okay with that. I don't really want to be a Sherry.
Sherry and Darnita, yeah.
Yeah.
We dodged those bullets.
Right, good. So she was born in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Fall River, Mass, so that's, up near my neck of the woods.
Yeah. Have you been there?
I have been to Fall River.
Okay. Her house is like a museum, like the one where the murders took place. It's like a, not a museum, it's a bed and breakfast. Yeah. So you can stay overnight in the room, where a gruesome murder took place.
Oh, okay.
If you want.
Sure, why not?
Get some scones in the morning afterwards.
Scones. What rhymes with scones?
Bones. Like the bones of her victims.
Scones and bones. That would be a great name for a dog-friendly bakery.
Oh, no, that would. Scones and bones. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I don't like baking.
So Lizzie's mom, Sarah, died when Lizzie was pretty young, when she was about 3. And Andrew Borden remarried pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, which was very common in that time.
Yeah.
Especially you're a single father. You essentially want a wife to raise your kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a lot of it. So, Lizzie was pretty young when her stepmother came into the picture, but they never, ever got along. Lizzie always addressed her stepmother as Mrs. Borden.
Wow.
There's a lot of formality around the Borden
especially
household.
You're a toddler and, you've just lost your mom and this other person comes into your household.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Not even like auntie or anything.
No, Mrs. Borden.
Mrs. Borden. Yeah. That sets the scene.
That really sets the scene. So Lizzie really was convinced that she'd only married her dad because of his money. Because her dad was a successful businessman. He had a couple different ventures. One of them was caskets.
Yeah, I saw that he was a manufacturer or a salesperson of furniture and caskets. But I gotta say, probably was a booming business.
Yeah.
People weren't living all that old.
No one got cremated.
No one got cremated, that's true.
Everyone got buried. So, yeah.
Yeah. So he had some money.
He had a lot of money.
Money.
He did really, really well for himself.
Were they living, the high life in Fall River, Massachusetts?
They were absolutely not.
Why was that?
He was religious, and I think that was just part of living humbly. I think he is also one of those rich guys who gets rich because he doesn't spend all of his money. Mm. So they lived in a house. They lived in the unfashionable part of town.
Okay.
And they didn't have running water and they didn't have electricity. It was actually coming into being really common around the time that the murders were committed. So it's not this was something just for really, really fancy people. This was something for upper middle class people.
So he was just saving his money and kind of sitting on it and not using it really to benefit the lives of his family.
And making them go shit in an outhouse.
Really sounds like a warm household when you're your father's just I have a shit ton of money, but you can't have a toilet and you have to call your stepmother Mrs. Borden.
I think that was Lizzie's choice to call her stepmother Mrs. Borden. Yeah.
She was fiery from the beginning.
Yeah, the Mrs. Borden stuff was just about not recognizing her as mother, not even humanizing her with a first name. She's just Mrs. Borden.
Well, they're from outside Boston, so she would have called her Ma. Ma Borden.
Oh, or Marmee, in Little Women.
Marmee?
Yeah. You didn't read Little Women?
No, I'm not literate, and No, I'm not well read.
You have a lot of books for someone who's not.
I don't
very
read them. I just put them on my bookshelf like every other asshole. All right, off topic.
It's not like that's never going to happen.
Yeah,
that's going to happen a lot. So strap in for a lot of wandering diversion conversation pieces.
That's fair. I feel like there's not a lot out there about Lizzie as a child and as an adolescent.
Well, I mean, think about it this way: like the people who knew her as a child were dead.
Oh, there's that.
Because when she became famous, and she wasn't famous before that, so like she's just some girl. They did interview like her friends. She was pretty active in like the church. She actually taught Sunday school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You never know.
You never know.
You never know. Well, let's be clear. Again, she only allegedly murdered her father and stepmother.
I mean, yeah, but she did it though.
With a hatchet.
Yes, allegedly. She was, I agree, she was not convicted.
Yeah.
There could be another story. But is there? I'm of the belief that she did it. I think it's an OJ situation.
Well, you've got to convince me because I don't know a ton about this story. So
I'll do my damnedest.
I'm fairly familiar with the rhyme, but just for our listeners, why don't you refresh our memory?
Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her father 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her mother 41. I see children jump roping, chanting this chant, to like stay on the rhythm of the jump rope.
Yeah. Well, it's like Ring Around the Rosie, right? Like, shit's dark when you're a child in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true. They, death didn't faze them so much.
So, Lizzie is famous for whacking to death her father and her stepmother. Allegedly. So let's dig into that.
Yeah. Kind of to set the scene before this.
Yeah.
So there is, we've talked about the Mrs. Borden thing. There's just been tension in this house. For a long time.
And is Lizzie, an only child?
She's not. She has a sister named Emma.
But that's it. So it's just her and Emma, dear old dad, and Mrs. Borden.
Yes. And their maid.
But it was common at that time for like middle class families to have maids.
Yeah. The maid was just kind of there to like help do some of the stuff. Because if they lived in that bigger house, one with plumbing and shit. Yeah, they'd have a staff. They'd have a bunch of maids and stuff. Lizzie and Emma and Abby, they all still had chores to do.
So, and Abby was the maid.
No, Abby was their stepmom.
Oh, okay. So Mrs. Borden was Abby.
Mrs. Borden was Abby. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so there's a lot of tension in this house, and most of it's over money. Lizzie had always thought that Mrs. Borden had married her dad because of his money, and then Andrew Borden gave Abby's family some property. And Lizzie was not happy about that.
Okay.
Because she thought she was entitled to get some property.
In this time frame where we're talking, where her father starts to essentially give property to his wife's family, how old are we talking?
Lizzie about 32.
She's about 32.
Yeah.
Okay. So she's a full-grown thornback.
She is a full-grown thornback.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's just kind of maybe, allegedly, hanging out, to see when dad's going to, I don't know.
Kick the bucket.
Right. Or make her life a little sweeter.
Because Lizzie's greatest desire is to live in a fancy house with plumbing and electricity. She wants to, live like the fashionable people do.
She wants to live the good life.
Yeah, but she's not.
Yeah.
She's not. Their house sucks.
So this was really like a turn of the knife, if you will. Her father already knew that she was kind of unhappy with the situation and that she didn't like her stepmother and kind of was concerned about how the money was being distributed or not. And so this step turned up the heat.
It was at a simmer before, and now it's at a low boil. It's the middle of summer when the murder happens. It's the hottest day of the year so far. So it's the 1890s. They are all wearing lots and lots of clothes.
Yeah.
It's hot as fuck.
So it is humid as hell.
Yeah.
There are black flies everywhere.
Yeah.
And you hate your life.
And they are covered head to toe in fabric. There's no relief from this. I think right there, that's some stabby conditions.
Some stabby conditions.
Little choppy.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. We kind of have a general timeline of what went on in the house. And I don't know who we're getting that from. I think we're getting it from part of it from the maid and part of it from Lizzie herself, who was not a reliable narrator.
And where was everyone else? So where was Abby? Where
Yeah.
was dear old dad? Where was Emma?
Emma was on a trip to see some friends. So she was...
So she was out of town.
She was out. Yeah, she was out of town.
That's curious.
There is a theory related to that.
Yeah. I mean, if Emma is the one person in the house that Lizzie does get along with and does genuinely care for, it's curious that she would wait, if she is the murderess, for Emma to be out of town.
She is.
Okay, so that's just, that's a point of interest.
Yes. I mean, there is a theory that Emma used that as a cover story. She set off to her destination. She looped back, committed the murders, and then went on to her destination.
That's one possible theory. So let's get through the...
Yeah, we'll get through the murders.
And then we'll come back and talk hypotheses.
Yes. Andrew Borden was out on his daily walk. Abby was in the house. So at about 9:30, 10, around there, she goes upstairs to go make some beds. It wasn't usually something that she did, actually. It was actually either Lizzie or Emma's chore. Yeah, and they approximate that she died at like 10:30 or 11, or right around
So she was the first one to die.
She was the first one to die,
okay.
Yes.
So Emma goes upstairs to make the beds. Emma is out of town.
Abby goes upstairs to make the beds.
So early in the morning, we have Mr. Borden going on his walk. We have Emma out of town, right? Yeah. So the people left in the house are going to be Abby, the stepmom, are going to be Lizzie, and are going to be the maid.
Yes.
Okay. Abby goes upstairs to make some beds. Emma's out of town, so maybe that's why she's pitching in.
That could be.
Pitching in. So she goes upstairs. Do we know where the maid and Lizzie are at this time?
I believe it is known where they were.
Okay.
Well, then Lizzie, her stories changed so much. Like, I think she said that she was, like, out in the barn doing something, and she was, like, downstairs doing something.
So you have the two of them who are unaccounted for, or, like, accounted for in the general vicinity. So
yes.
You potentially have those two as the most likely suspects of what is about to occur. Okay, so what happens next?
Andrew Borden gets back from his walk probably right about the time that Abby was killed. It's about 11. So he goes to lay down and take a nap on the couch. And at about 11, Lizzie goes to the maid and starts screaming, "Someone has killed father! Someone has killed father!" And the maid comes in and sees the crime scene, the blood and the gore.
What is she seeing?
She is seeing Andrew Borden laid out. He's still on the couch, but like his face has been bashed in. There's pictures. It's pretty gruesome.
Okay. And at this point, do we know if they knew that Abby was upstairs dead as well?
They did not yet.
Okay.
They were about to discover that. Abby was murdered first, but Andrew was discovered first.
Okay. So potentially, if it was someone from outside the home, they were lying in wait for Andrew to come back. So it couldn't have just been someone who was walking by the house, like some sort of transient or something like this, who comes in and kills Abby on the second floor, doesn't go after anyone else in the house.
Right.
And then just like waits around a really long time for Mr. Borden to come home and lay on the couch to take his nap. And then also just hatchets him to death as well. So that really also points to someone who is inside the house already.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're still looking at the maid and Lizzie. You haven't convinced me because I don't know.
The maid? You think it's the maid?
If this was Clue, it would be the maid.
The police don't really think it's the maid. They question the maid, and she does testify at the trial later. But really, they're fixated on Lizzie. So she is talking. They're investigating. I don't know how they were able to discern the times of death in the 1890s. It seems like, they seem like so primitive.
Just like as a murder junkie, as like a murder porn aficionado, if you will.
I will.
The fact is, a lot of that science I don't think has changed because a lot of it was about, has rigor set in? And temperature-wise, like how they would take their temperatures, because we did know like what the normal temperature of a human living body was at the time. So it's kind of like how many degrees down has that temperature gone. But at the same time, you just told us earlier that it is hot as hell outside. We're in the middle of the summer. What month are we talking here?
This is August.
It's August.
Yeah, it's August.
It's August.
It's the worst fucking month of the summer.
The worst month of the summer in northern New England.
Anywhere, really.
But essentially, like, even though it was like a warm day, they could still get like a general idea of how long the bodies had been there. But it really sounds like fairly soon after Mr. Borden was killed, Lizzie brought her father's death to the attention of the maid, and very soon after, the constable, or whatever they were called at the time,
I think they were just police officers.
The police, I like the word constable, were called to the house.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how soon after the police are brought in does it seem like Lizzie fell under suspicion?
Immediately. Yeah. You're most likely to be murdered by someone you know.
That's true.
Lizzie had...
You're saying she had motive.
She had motive.
She was there.
She was there, right. She had motive. She had opportunity.
Let's talk about means. So let's go into detail a little bit about how were Abby and Mr. Borden killed.
Gruesomely. So it took about 17 whacks of the hatchet to kill Mrs. Borden.
Okay. And what about Dad?
About 11. His
interesting.
His was super, super gruesome. His eyeball was even cut in half. And they say that suggests that he was asleep at the time that he was murdered.
I mean, in both instances, that's overkill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we know overkill usually hints at some sort of personal resentment, anger issue, with that person between the perpetrator and the victim of the crime, right?
Right.
And it's interesting, too, that Mrs. Borden, Abby, got more than dear old Dad. Because, look, if we're saying, okay, it was either, or the thing that makes the most sense is it was either the maid or it was Lizzie, right?
Right.
So we're talking women.
Right.
Look, if I were to be in an instance, let's say I was in like some horror movie or something, and it was like, okay, you can kill like middle-aged lady here, or you can kill like a man in the prime of his life, and I'm worried about who's going to get up from that, and I'm trying to defend myself, I'm probably going to be a little more vicious toward the male, because that is someone who's more of a threat to me, right?
Right.
The fact that stepmom got 17 and dad got 11, that kind of also implies that like mom was where more of the hatred was directed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you trying to convince me that
No,
Lizzie did it?
I'm just, allegedly.
Allegedly. That does make sense, though, because
again,
I'm sure she was mad at her dad, but I don't think she hated him.
Yeah. And again, if it was someone coming off the street, like, were there any signs of robbery?
No.
Was there any sign of a break-in?
No.
And also...
No. In fact, the door was locked. When Andrew Borden got back from his walk, the door was locked, and I don't think it customarily was.
Oh, okay. So someone
was even... They were even, like, making the house more secure.
So they wanted to be aware, whoever the perpetrator was, wanted to be aware when he got back.
Yeah, and I think just to, like, stop people from coming in.
Yeah.
Just, if you're going to murder, just, lock the door before you start.
I mean, the other interesting thing is if it was someone from the street coming in, you would expect that there would be some sort of a ruckus or something. Like, if you're talking about dad, if dad was asleep, then that kind of takes away, like, there is no element of surprise. So that's taken out of contemplation. But if you're talking the stepmom, whether it was an outsider or it was someone in the house, she was probably crept up on or something like that.
Actually, no. Abby was facing her victim at the time.
Oh. So this was like a one-on-one.
Yeah. I guess she was crept up on and then she turned around.
Okay.
And then got it. But yeah, she was not like ambushed from the back.
So here is something that kind of makes me scratch my head in terms of guilt of only one person is, did she not scream? Did she not like there wasn't enough of kind of like a back and forth or some side kind of struggle that alerted the other person in the house? Because like, how big is this house that the person who was not doing the murdering didn't hear about something going on? Because again, like if you're talking Lizzie and the maid, if it was either one of them or both of them, right? If it was Lizzie, then why didn't the maid hear? If it was the maid, why didn't Lizzie hear? And if it was like both of them, we only seem to have signs of one weapon being used. So is the other aware but not participating so much?
That is a good question. It's a head scratcher. Yeah, the whole thing is a head scratcher.
Yeah, I mean, ear witnesses are always brought up in cases when you're talking, especially something that is that violent, right? If you're not going to hear a gunshot, you're probably going to hear something having to do with like a struggle or a scream for someone who is either afraid or in pain or something like that. So that's just something like that kind of makes me scratch my head.
Yeah, agreed.
So we know that whomever it was,
Lizzie.
Is there a better word for whacked? How do you
hatcheted?
Hatcheted?
Hatcheted. That's worse.
Struck.
Struck.
There we go.
Yes, struck.
Struck Abby 17 times. Struck Mr. Borden 11 times. Did they find the murder weapon?
No. They didn't find the exact murder weapon. They found hatchets and axes in the house. And this is where the OJ thing is coming up. They found these things. I don't think they took them or really investigated them. So they did find a hatchet with a broken handle, which, I mean, because doesn't that kind of point to it being used very vigorously?
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at 30. Help me with math. Is it 38 strikes? With arguably the same weapon?
God, don't make me do math. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
So that's interesting. You know, and for anyone who doesn't know, a hatchet is essentially a mini axe, right? It's a much smaller, much lighter version of an axe. A man, if he came in the house and used a weapon that was already inside the house, if he had access to axes and hatchets, he probably would have gotten an axe. An axe does the deal a lot faster and easier, but an axe is heavy as hell. Like, have you ever swung an axe?
I haven't. I haven't.
I'm from Maine. I've swung an axe. You're from Minnesota. You should have swung an axe. Are you from the city?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm from the fucking sticks, and I've swung some axes, and they are heavy as hell. And they're just kind of like unwieldy. Is that the word?
That's a good word. I think that's a good word.
They're just kind of unbalanced. You know, it's something you really have to kind of have a handle on. Bad pun.
Awful.
So that again maybe suggests if someone chose the hatchet, maybe they were a smaller person. Maybe they were someone who didn't have a lot of experience with an axe. I'm just purely speculating here.
No, you're making a great case.
But it is something like that. Okay, no, it's not what I'm trying to do.
So they're finding all of the sharp, choppy things. The axes, the hatchets. The hatchet head with the broken handle. That one was, they thought maybe it was the murder weapon, but didn't have any blood on it. I guess they didn't have luminol then, so it'd been cleaned, but it had been sprinkled with some dust to make it look like it hadn't been moved in a while. So it looked like very deliberately staged as like, this old axe, it hasn't been used in ages.
You know what? I don't know. If it was Lizzie or if it was the maid, either, I'm kind of like, they should get some props. Yeah, that's interesting. And there were podcasts or Dateline or 2020 to watch back then.
Right? Yeah,
she did. We know how to kill people.
Yeah, and get away with it.
Yeah, we sure do.
Like, it didn't sound like a vibrant house. I guess I don't even imagine books there. I don't know. I'm just speculating. That, like, so she's not even, like, reading up on murders. Yeah. This is all coming from her head.
She did it. Because she's had 32 years to think about it.
Yeah. She's had some time to think about it. She's been pondering this and pondering this.
So they question her. They question the maid. What other evidence, if any, are they finding?
There was a close call with some evidence.
Okay.
So there is a dress. Not like a Monica Lewinsky dress, but there is a dress in question. One of Lizzie's friends. So this is kind of wacky.
That Lizzie has friends?
That Lizzie has friends, and that those friends are like, did 2 horrible murders just take place here? I'll come stay with you because you must be so scared. Lizzie's friend is there, and she sees Lizzie at like a fire pit or something, and she's ripping up a dress and burning it. And she says, I got paint on it. I don't know how the police didn't find this dress. Yeah. And then Lizzie just pulls it out of nowhere and starts burning it.
Have gone. So this friend was suspicious enough of what she saw to go to the police?
She did testify later. I don't think she went to the police, but they did ask her about it. And then later she testified about it in court that she's seeing Lizzie perhaps destroying the evidence, the blood-stained evidence.
I mean, do we know where she was burning it, though?
It was in the kitchen. So she was just
burning
in the kitchen.
Inside the house.
Yeah, just burning it in the
It wasn't in the trash pile out back.
No.
Okay, that's curious.
It was in the kitchen. That's curious. A little curious. And, like, really, that, like, her father just died and her stepmother, they were brutally murdered. Like,
that's painting.
Right. And, like, somehow you didn't get around to burning this dress before.
Also, dresses were really expensive in the day. You know, they were made to fit. So they're custom made.
Yeah.
And they have, as you mentioned before, many layers. But you're talking lace, you're talking wool, you're talking things that are not cheap. If you get a little paint on your dress, you don't
burn
the
it.
whole dress.
Yeah.
You're still going to salvage what you can out of it.
You're not just ripping it up and throwing it in the fire.
Throwing it in the fire. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. See,
I don't know that really tilts the needle at all for me, though.
No, but I think that tilts it to the OJ-ness of it, that, like, they're doing a bad job collecting evidence.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know, like the fucking cops in the OJ case, they're like, let me put this in my car and drive up to the valley. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, they probably hadn't had, like, a violent, gruesome double murder in Fall River, you know?
Yeah, that's probably the most violent crime we've seen in years. I mean, it's not just the physical evidence that's tilting it towards old Lizzie, because the cops are questioning her and she keeps changing her story.
What are some examples of kind of like what Lizzie was saying? I'm
going to read straight from Wikipedia just to answer that question. Initially, she reported hearing a groan or scraping noise or distress call before entering the house.
When she's coming back from the barn.
Yeah. And then 2 hours later, she told police she had heard nothing and entered the house, not realizing anything was wrong. When asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby had received a note asking her to go to a sick friend. Most of the officers who interviewed Borden reported that they disliked her attitude. Which, okay, that's pretty shitty. I will give you that.
If someone dies and you don't like them, people still think you should be really upset. But maybe you're not upset. That doesn't mean you killed them.
Exactly. Some said she was too calm and poised. Despite her quote-unquote attitude and changing alibis, nobody bothered to check her for bloodstains. See what I'm saying? They didn't do a good job. Police did search her room, but it was a cursory inspection. At the trial, they admitted to not doing a proper search, and they were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence. So everyone thought they were fucking up. It was an OJ. Mm-hmm. During the police interview, Lizzie claimed that when Andrew lay down to take a nap, that she had taken his boots off for him and put slippers on his feet. But in the photo of the murder scene, he's very clearly wearing boots.
So either she put his slippers on, then went somewhere else, and then he woke up, put his boots back on, and then laid down and got murdered on his couch, or was pushed down or something.
Or she was just lying.
So either Lizzie is telling the truth, or she's essentially trying to establish that she saw her father before he got killed and he was fine. He was laying on the couch asleep in his slippers. Yeah. Which we believe is false.
There's receipts. There's a picture of him and his bashed in skull.
He could have woken up and put his boots back on.
Do you think that's a realistic thing that someone would do? When it was possible. 800 degrees out. If you had your shoes off, you're like, these are not going back on.
Just put on slippers. Slippers are hot.
They're also hot. Yeah. Why was he wearing slippers? Why would you want to wear slippers in that heat?
Anyway. It's the proper thing to do. But the cops put enough together that they think that the system can make a case.
Yeah. And they do arrest her.
Okay.
And she is taken in. She is in prison until she goes on trial. There's an inquest. I guess, subpoenaing people and asking questions? Is that what you're a lawyer. They're just getting evidence for the trial?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's an investigation, but an inquest is more from the perspective of the district attorney or the prosecutor at the time.
And obviously there's enough there because she does go on trial.
So what happens at trial?
So they bring as evidence, in the skulls, the bashed in skulls.
Oh, wow.
Of Abby and Andrew.
That would happen today.
No.
You'd that's have highly prejudicial.
Yeah.
That would not happen.
Yeah. Lizzie did faint when she saw them.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you think about that, Amy?
I mean, just because you intentionally and are, happy that you murdered doesn't mean that you can't be grossed out by what you did.
That's fair. Okay. All right. I thought you were going to say she faked it. But okay.
And also, yeah, I think she also...
And also you think she faked it.
Also, I kind of think she faked it.
Okay.
I mostly think she faked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so they bring these into, was this a jury trial or was it a judge?
Yes, it was a jury trial.
It was a jury trial. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so they bring in the skulls to show them how violent and vicious these attacks were.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, the jury, they only deliberate for an hour and a half.
An hour and a half. The prosecutor really did not make this case. So a jury of her peers.
Well, not really, because they're old white men. It's just old white men.
A jury of old white men.
Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe they just didn't think a woman could do it.
I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Ladies, you can do anything. So a jury of all white men only took an hour and a half to acquit her of the murders of her father and her stepmother.
Yeah.
I mean, there definitely has to be some gender politics going on there.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think she did it. But I wasn't on the jury, so I guess I don't get a say.
Well, also in this, there's a difference between someone being guilty and someone being convictable. And, you know, as someone who in a former life was an attorney, that's kind of where I come up against a lot of people, is people are enraged about some of the outcomes of cases. It's the issue of not whether this person did it, but whether it can be proved beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case if that person was the perpetrator. It more than likely was Lizzie, but more than likely is not the standard.
Right. It is not beyond a reasonable doubt.
There's no one piece of evidence for me that really seals it. I have other questions, like what happens to Daddy's money? What happens with the sister? What happens after the trial? She's just been acquitted. Like, how does her life change? Like, all of these things now come into play. Because she's walking free. She's done for life. She can't be retried.
No. Unless she murders again.
Unless she murdered. Well,
she was never involved in the legal system again.
Oh, okay.
So she gets acquitted, and upon exiting the courtroom, she says she was the happiest woman in the world, which is just not a statement that anyone would make today after being acquitted.
Well, it's interesting.
They would still be like thoughts and prayers, or, you know, my deepest sympathies go out to me, I guess, because she's a family, but...
I mean, it definitely is at least in poor taste that she would say that coming out of the trial, instead of saying something like, I'm glad the justice was delivered. Now I hope the cops go find the real killers of my parents.
Right. But, I mean, she didn't have, you know, media training.
Or empathy or love for her parents.
Right. And she was the happiest woman in the world because her father's estate went to her.
It all went to her. Was she the oldest?
No, Emma was older than her. So, I mean, it probably went to the two of them.
Emma.
But Lizzie was like the more fiery of the two.
Yeah.
And she was the one who wanted to live on the hill. I think Emma was like a little bit more soft-spoken. Yeah. And, you know, she was okay.
What's the hill? The hill is like the nice part of town?
The hill is, the swanky neighborhood where Lizzie's always wanted to live. Where they have indoor plumbing and where they have electricity.
And what's her relationship with her sister like now? Do we know anything about if her sister suspected her? Did her sister stand by her side afterwards? What happened?
I'm going to pass on all of the mechanics of that, but they did live together.
And what happened with the money?
Lizzie spent it. So she
really was the happiest woman in the world.
She really was. She sold the murder house.
Yep. Okay.
And she bought a large, beautiful mansion equipped with all of the modern luxuries. And she named it Maplecroft.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she wasn't trying to, you know, recede into the shadows and live a quiet life.
Not really,
She was like, I'm going to buy an estate.
In the same town.
Yeah. That's some cojones on her.
Right?
Yeah. Especially, like, whether she did it or not, that's kind of ballsy.
I think so.
I mean, the ovaries on her. Let's be good feminists. Yeah. And the fact that her sister lived with her, like, the sister clearly wasn't very vocal about any opposition to this kind of, like, spending and, like, grandiosity. What is interesting to me is Emma's point of view, because if she knew about it, isn't she potentially just as morally guilty? She doesn't have to go through the rigor of trial, and she gets to also live the high life, you know, afterwards. Right. If she didn't know about it, then it's also kind of curious, because she comes back, she has all the same evidence that we do and more, because she was actually there at the time. She knew the dynamics in the household better than anyone else except for Lizzie herself, and then goes to live with Lizzie in this grand estate and with all the modern luxuries and living the high life. She would have arguably been just as suspicious, if not more so, than all these people in the town. So speaking of those people, what happened kind of like afterwards outside of the house? Did anything actually happen?
Yeah, she's ostracized.
She's ostracized.
Yes, her church friends are like, you're just, there's the stink of murder on you. So
people outside of the jury, people really had a strong belief that she committed the murders.
Yeah.
Also, Emma standing by her while this was such a public consensus. It's also curious. I mean, it keeps pointing for me to the fact that they were extremely close. And what's just as hard for you to believe that Lizzie wasn't the one who did it is just as hard for me to believe that Emma wasn't in on it. Or if she wasn't in on it, that she completely forgave all because she's getting to move uptown.
Right. And she's getting like servants and her sister. I think she's just maybe grateful too that her sister didn't go to jail. Because she would have had basically no family. If
she would have had a lot of money.
She would have had a lot of money. Yeah,
so they just continue to live together, two spinsters.
Yeah.
I mean,
two spinster sisters.
And living it up in this grand home in Fall River. Do we know what they, or at least Lizzie, did with the rest of her life?
She stayed in Fall River.
She just stayed in Fall River.
Yeah. She traveled and lived a pretty fabulous life. But she lived in Maplecroft until she died.
Wow. How old was Lizzie when she died?
Lizzie was 66 when she died.
Oh, wow. Which is actually kind of old for someone in that era. That means she lived like more than 30 years after the murders of her parents.
Yeah.
Wow. Just living in Fall River, being ostracized, not having any friends, just her and her sister living in Maplecroft.
She didn't have friends in Fall River, but there's like some mention of her like having parties and being friends with an actress.
Oh, interesting. You know, again, that points to like the high life, you know, kind of like schmoozing with the people who were, you know, the popular people of the time.
Right.
That's very interesting.
Like she was I think she was a striver. You know, like she wanted the big house. She wanted to live in the fashionable neighborhood.
Yeah. But it's interesting because when we talk about people that are strivers, one of the ways, especially that it is said women sometimes strive, is they marry above their station in life. We don't see evidence that that was something that Lizzie had tried to do. It just sounded like Dad got money, I should have that money. Whether she made it happen or not, she got that money in the end and lived the life she wanted to live without having to essentially marry without making the choice to do the soulless thing of marrying for money.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I will say, so, you know, I don't think Lizzie was a good person. Let's be clear. I don't. She's fascinating.
Leave Lizzie alone. I'm just kidding. She's a murderer. Yeah!
You admitted it.
I mean, she's probably a murderer.
She's probably a murderer. She's
But look, if I say probably a murderer, that means she's probably not convictable.
Even though she was sort of a shitty person, she left some of her fortune to the Fall River Animal Rescue League.
You know who leaves their money to pet foundations and animal leagues? People who don't like people, which is fine.
I mean, she didn't leave it all. She just some of it.
So but I mean, she didn't have offspring, so she didn't have people to inherit that money except for her sister. And I think I read that her and her sister died within days of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. I mean, that the relationship of their lives was each other, which we saw last time when we talked about Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Yeah. These are a very different type.
Very different type.
Of non-romantic female relationship.
This was much less healthy. It had to have been, right? This had to have been much less healthy.
Yes.
She also left money for perpetual care of her father's grave.
Just her father's.
Just her father's.
Oh,
yeah.
She's really still sticking it to Abby.
Yeah.
Still sticking it.
Like with an axe?
Yeah.
With a hatchet?
With a hatchet.
Yeah.
Sticking it right in her head.
But yeah, she died a very wealthy woman. She managed that money that she got. So she didn't just fritter it away on the house and parties and stuff. Like she also invested and she owned another house.
Murderous or not, she was a smart woman.
Yeah.
I mean, she did become famous. I don't know if that was one of her goals, but
she did become famous.
She did. I mean, think
infamous. She became infamous.
Potato. I mean, to have your name be that well known and to people know when you say Lizzie Borden, they know what you're talking about. You're not from New England and you knew about Lizzie.
Yeah.
I mean, how did her spinsterhood really come into play? I mean, if she was the murderess that she is, remembered to be in pulp culture, she really, like, leaned into it.
Yeah.
She didn't go out and find a husband.
She wasn't happy at home. We know that. She didn't escape by marrying.
Yes.
Which, we don't know how much of an option it was for her. Like,
Yeah.
we don't know how many eligible men there were. She probably would have wanted to marry, like, above her
She
punching
seems like
weight.
a take charge kind of woman.
Yeah.
And maybe that wasn't,
So if that's
a quality that was really...
Right. If that's something she
embraced.
wanted, she would have gone out and gotten married.
Yeah.
So that leads me to believe that, maybe she didn't want to get married. It just wasn't a priority for her. And that the money was a priority for her. I think also part of why the murder happened is because she was a spinster. She was in that house for so many years. If she'd been married, before she was a Thornback.
Right. She got moved on.
If this were a Dateline episode, what would the title be?
Oh, that is so good. I'm hearing Keith in my head. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Who murders in the morning?
I mean, that's actually not a bad title.
Murder in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A murder in the morning.
Or let's try something with Hatchet.
Okay. The sharp
or something
edge
called Strikes.
The sharp edge of justice.
The sharp edge of justice. Except for, in your opinion, there was none. The strike of death.
Murder in the morning.
That could also be like a James Taylor song.
Yeah, I don't know what we learned from Lizzie. Did we learn how to either get away with murder or not get away with murder?
I don't think whomever did it,
Lizzie.
Whoever did it, whether it was Lizzie or the maid.
There are other suspects, but or other theories, not other suspects.
What are some of the other theories?
That it was just a stranger.
Okay.
That
falls flat for me.
Yeah, that it was Emma, and that she had like left and then doubled back.
Then I feel like it would have been both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like his business associate or like someone that Andrew was in business with. But that kind of doesn't explain Abby.
Doesn't explain Abby and her being upstairs. Like, you have to go upstairs and look for another person. And if that's the case and you're looking around the house, then why wouldn't you have found the maid or Lizzie?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it seems like it was specifically those two were the intended victims, especially with the number of strikes. Wax.
So maybe we learned nothing this time, and that's
the waxing moon.
Oh, that's the Dateline title.
The waxing moon.
The waxing moon.
Yeah. This is not a podcast about the best spinsters in history.
No. This is just about spinsters.
Just spinsters.
Yes. People are flawed.
So with that in mind, Amy, why are you single?
I'm single because I just can't be bothered to like make myself pretty. I wear makeup if I have to be on camera, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to do it to please someone else.
Yeah. And we're in LA. We're not in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Right. But here, you have to put on your war paint to go out and find a husband.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just not that combative.
Just not like you are combative.
I am combative, but not.
Maybe the answer is I'm too combative. That's probably my answer.
I mean, I just thought that was obvious. That was just too low-hanging fruit. So yeah, that is why I am still single. Eva, why are you single?
Well, the sad answer is that my mother was not a good role model for how to choose what men to have in your life. I think one of the reasons I'm still single is I like to kind of pull up my roots at a moment's notice, and that doesn't usually work with someone else's lifestyle, career, etc. I'm not good at compromise. Like, I feel like I'd like to date a man who's employed, but if he's employed, then I can't just say, hey, next Wednesday, let's put everything in our car and go to Maine for 3 months. This has been the second episode of The Spinster Life.
It's going to get much less murdery from here on out.
Less murdery, probably equally amateurish.
But, stay tuned because
Stay tuned.
like it could go either way.
Go either way.
Either way, it's really interesting to see.
Eventually, we're going to start having guests.
Yes.
And they will know more things than we do. But you know what? I know more about Lizzie. I know more about Susie B.
Don't call her Susie.
Call her Susie. And that's good enough for me. As a reminder, you can find us on Instagram under Spinster Life Podcast.
You can find us on our website, spinsterlife.com. And if you want, you can shoot us an email, spinsterlifepodcast@gmail.com.
We're definitely open to suggestions about which spinster you would like to learn just a little bit about.
All right. Happy spinster life, Eva.
Happy spinster life, Amy.
All right. We'll see you next time.